Imagine going to the eye doctor, and when you walk into their office, they just take the glasses off their face and hand you their glasses, saying, "Hey, these should work. They work for me." That scenario seems absurd, and I doubt any of us have experienced that. But if you think about it, we do it all the time. We prescribe advice before we even diagnose someone else's problem. Whether it be from a parent to a child, from a friend to a friend, we give advice before actually understanding what the other person's problem is. And that's this concept, is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And when we talk about seeking first to understand, we can't assume that we understand because we've experienced it ourselves before. Saying, "I'm sick of work," and you respond, "I feel that way too, but we have to work to pay the bills." "Well, I know that, but my job absolutely sucks, honey. No matter what job we get, we're going to end up not liking it." Well, what happens in that scenario is you're now sitting on opposite sides of the table and bantering with one another instead of understanding the other person and looking at the problem together. There are different levels of listening. The first level of listening is ignoring, which is not listening at all. The second level is pretending, and then there's selective listening, which is listening to certain parts of what's being said. There's active and reflective listening, which are skills used to mimic what was said or to listen to something autobiographically. And I'd like you to think about that for a minute. Because when we think we're being very effective listeners, what we're actually doing is hearing what someone's saying and then comparing it to our own lives. We're using ourselves as a frame of reference. Well, there's an even more sophisticated level of listening, and that's empathic listening. This is listening with the intent to understand intellectually and emotionally. And just like anything else, there are developmental stages of empathic listening. And there are 4 of them. Imagine your partner told you, "I've had it with work." Well, in stage 1 of empathic listening, which is the most immature stage, what you'd be taught to do is to mimic the content. So if your partner said, "I've had it with work," you'd reply, "You've had it with work." In a more developed stage, stage 2 of empathic listening, if your partner said, "I've had it with work," you would attempt to rephrase the content. "You're sick of work." And in the third stage of development of empathic listening, your partner might say, "I've had it with work," and you reflect the feeling that they're saying. You're feeling upset. And the most effective, most developed stage of empathic listening is to rephrase the content and reflect the feeling. This is a combination of stage 2 and 3 of development. If your partner said, "I've had it with work," you would reply, "You're feeling upset about work." And then you take this strategy of rephrasing the content and reflected the feeling throughout the conversation. It's used during conversations to truly understand the content and feelings of the other person's messages. If you carry these concepts through an entire conversation, you will be able to explain to the other person what their point of view is better than they could even understand it. It's at this point that we're both sitting on the same side of the table and looking at the problem together. And then we can try to come up with solutions. Only when we understand first, only when we truly understand someone's opinion, someone's viewpoint, and don't frame it on our own point of reference, only then would we be able to attempt to be understood. The time to be understood is when the conversation leads to logic and advice is requested. It's when your partner asks you, "Do you think I should be looking for another job?" That is logic. That is when you can provide your input. That is when you can attempt to be understood. But as soon as it goes back to an emotional response of, "I'm just so sick of the place," well, that's when we start using that empathic listening again. That's when we rephrase the content and reflect the feeling again until logic is brought back into the conversation. And that's the 5th habit, is to seek first to understand, then to be understood. When